Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So if you watched our last video, you'll know that we were concentrating on the sound deadening in the campervan. But with that now taken care of, I want to turn my focus and attention to the first fix wiring. So in this video, I'm going to be concentrating on running the cables for the majority of the electrical items in the campervan. I'll be talking a little bit about the electrical layout, what's going where and why, and I'm also going to touch upon cable sizing. So if you think that's something that might interest you, then please stick around. Now before we look at the wiring, I just want to take a second just to talk to you about what we'll be using the campervan for, because at the end of the day that's going to directly influence what our electrical requirements are. Just like people, I don't think any two self-built campervans are alike, and one person might be using theirs for weekends away, stopping on campsites, and all they'll ever need is an electrical hookup to power all of their items. And then someone else, they might be using their campervan, well, they might be living in it full time, and their roof's completely filled with solar panels to generate their power and supply all their electrical items. Now as for us, we'll be mainly looking at short breaks away, a long weekend here, a week there, maybe 2 weeks away at a push. And to be honest, we don't really intend to use many campsites. We want to be constantly moving, finding new places to explore and experience. And as a result of that, we're hoping that the solar panel on the roof, accompanied by some battery to battery charging from the engine, will supply us with all the energy, all of the electricity that we need. Now off the top of my head, there's only 2 items that are going to have a large power draw on our electrical system. Maybe 3 if you include the Max Fan Deluxe, and that's the diesel heater and the 12-volt compressor fridge. But beyond those 2-3 items, I think really most of our power needs are going to be for USB charging for mobile devices such as phones and tablets. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think our power consumption is going to be that high really, and I think that'll be reflected in the 12-volt system that I'm about to show you today. So first things first, let's take a look at the floor plan. We're going for a pretty standard layout with a fixed bed across the back, and on the passenger side you can see a little kitchenette which overhangs the opening to the side loading door, whilst on the driver's side the driver's seat will swivel to meet a little table, and on the other side of that table will be a short bench seat. The only other thing in this layout that you can see, and it's not really relevant to our electrics, is a small cupboard that's going to be nestled between the bed and the rear of the bench seat, and that's going to house our porta potty. And just so you can get a better idea of how our lighting setup's going to look, here's our overhead cupboards. I think it's worth taking note of where our roof lights are in the van, because they'll directly influence where we can put our ceiling lights. So the idea as it stands is to have 3 lights in a line nestled between the roof lights. We're currently undecided whether or not to put a 4th light directly behind the Max fan. It's such a tight space there, I don't know whether it'll look right. Now directly under the cupboards we're going to have a further 3 lights. 1 above the table and 2 above the kitchenette. The only other lights in the campervan are going to be 2 reading lights at the top of the bed. We're going to have 3 USB charging points, 2 at the head and foot of the bed, and 1 at the table, accompanied by a cigarette lighter. The only other things that we'll need a 12-volt connection for are the fridge, the diesel heater, and the switch of the tap. Now before I start running any cables, I just want to quickly talk to you guys about cable sizing. Now disclaimer, I've got no prior experience of 12-volt electrics at all. In fact, electrics in general, I think the most complicated thing I've ever tackled is changing a plug. And that went well, so hopefully this should too, am I right? But yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. And with that in mind, I didn't want to go following some random advice online saying, use this cable size or use that cable size. I wanted to do my own research, gain the knowledge for myself, so 1, I can size the cables correctly for our campervan, and 2, if there's an issue later on down the line, hopefully I'll be able to sort it out for myself. This is just me, a guy with no prior experience, showing you how I'm wiring mine, giving you the reasons and the decisions behind my cable sizing and so on and so forth. And if anybody can take anything away from this, hopefully it'll be, if that idiot can do it, anyone can. So for those people out there who are just like me and don't understand cable sizing, let me drop a knowledge bomb on you. So as I now understand it, there's 2 things to consider when sizing your own cables, and that's 1, current carrying capacity, and 2, voltage drop. Now what do I mean by that? With current carrying capacity, you need to make sure that your cable's thick enough to carry a normally expected current from the device or appliance that you're attaching at the end of it. You also need to give yourself a little bit of headroom just as a safety net. Now, if the cable's too thin, the current passing through it will be too great, and it'll generate heat as it passes through the cable, and potentially that's a fire hazard. It could potentially melt your cables and start a fire, and that's the last thing we want. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, as I understand it, if you go too thick on your cable, the only real issue that you're going to have is your wallet or your purse is going to be a bit lighter, because the thicker the cable, the more expensive it is. And the general advice that I see online is, if you're unsure of the cable size that you've selected, as a precaution, go up in size. It won't do you any harm. Now, with regards to voltage drop, as that current passes down the cable, it's going to come up against resistance, and the further it has to travel, the more of an issue this then becomes. So if you've got a thin cable and the current's passing from your battery to the item that it's supposed to power, that resistance could be too great, and by the time the current gets to the appliance or device, it might not have enough juice there to power it correctly, and that's when it becomes an issue. So as a general rule of thumb, an acceptable voltage drop falls between 3 and 4%. So with current carrying capacity and voltage drop in mind, along with some simple equations, a calculator and some charts, I managed to size all of the electrical cables for this camper van myself. So let me show you guys exactly how I did that, using my ceiling lights as an example. These are the bad boys that we decided to go with, and as you can see, they've got pretty good reviews. Now, I'm showing you these because I want you to take note of their wattage. Now, to find out what cable size I should be using, I need to find out what the amps are for these LED lights. So as it stands, my intention is to have 3 lights in a row nestled between the roof lights. So I need to add the wattage of all 3 lights together, and that gives us a grand total of 5.4 watts. Because it's a 12 volt system, all I need to do is take that combined wattage, divide it by 12, and that gives us our total amps. So when those 3 lights are switched on, I know that they'll be drawing a not so huge 0.45 amps from the Ledger batteries. Here's a chart from the British Standards Electrical Installations Handbook BS 7671, and you can see it up there in the top right hand corner. Now, if I'm completely honest, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. But if we take a closer look, on the left hand side we can see our prospective cable sizes highlighted in red, and highlighted in green you can see the current carrying capacity for each of the cables. Now, we know that our lights were drawing a measly 0.45 amps, so a 1mm cable rated at 11 amps will be more than sufficient. Now, as you can see from the header at the top, all of the information that we've highlighted in green are for cables in conduit stuck behind a wall. And because I'm a big kid and like colouring in, I thought I'd highlight in blue the values for cable in conduit mounted on a wall, and also in orange the values for cable, as it says there, clipped direct, which I can only assume is surface mounted. And just for argument's sake, highlighted in yellow are the voltage drops for all of the cables for their various mountings. I know that the 1mm cable should be more than adequate, but I need to find out whether or not a voltage drop is going to be an issue. And to be completely honest, I found that the easiest way to do that was to just use a voltage drop calculator. There's plenty of them available online. I mean, this one that I've used here, for instance, is from a website called 12 Volt Planet. It's really good. In fact, the whole site in general is good. Or you can just as easily download one to your phone. I mean, this is the first one that I've came across and it works just fine. And as you can see here, we both input into either calculator returns a pretty similar result. And clearly my chosen 1mm cable is well within that acceptable max voltage drop. What I've now learned after figuring all this out is that really all you need to figure out is what your amps are. You don't really need the chart. Whatever website you go to choose cables from, it'll show you next to the cable what its rating is, and the only thing that you really need to be mindful of is the voltage drop. And like I say, there's calculators for free all over the internet, and they take literally seconds to fill in. I just had to rinse and repeat this whole process for all of our electrical items in the camper van, and in the end it was really quite straightforward. All of our cable was cut to length with a bit extra taken into consideration. Better too long than too short, eh fellas? Plastic conduit was used to protect the cables. And personally, I found it much easier to run the cable through the conduit before then running it through the van. Where the cable protruded from the conduit, I wrapped a little bit of electrical tape around it just to give it a smooth edge so it was easy to feed through the struts. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that the conduit was used to protect the cable against any sharp edges. I made certain to mark up every single cable so I could remember what it was later down the line. So that's all the cables ran, so let me show you exactly what I've done with them and how it's all looking. So we start off down here on the passenger side. All the cables terminate above the wheel arch, and the plan is I'm going to run them, I'm going to run some trunking along the floor of the van and then to the other wheel arch there where all the other cables terminate over there. That's where our fuse box is going to sit. So that's the plan as it stands. I'm going to run everything across over there to the fuse box. Anyway, on the passenger side of things, let's have a look. So they all terminate above the wheel arch, and then they travel up this post and up that post there, and then you've got one that travels off to the right, and that's going to be for the lights above the little kitchenette unit. And then on the other side of things, we're going to have a cable that terminates there, and that's going to be for a USB port to charge. The plan is we're going to use our tablets as like a television, as like a TV. So if you want to watch Netflix, want to watch Amazon Prime, we're going to watch it on the tablet. So the tablet's going to be at the foot end of the bed, and it's going to obviously need a USB charging point if you're watching a long film, to save on that power drain. So that's what we're going to do there. On the driver's side of things, we've got 4 cables, and this one here travels down there, up the top and out the back, and it's going to power 2 items, that is. One's the max fan, and then this long run here along the top's going to obviously be the ceiling light. You probably guessed it. Now I'm not sure whether or not to have 1, 2, 3 lights in that space there, or this little narrow gap here, would you add a 4th light? Now I'm not sure. I really don't know what to do for the best. So if anybody's got any advice that they want to give me, drop it down in the comment section down below. I'd really appreciate it. But as for the other 3 cables, one of those feeds along there, up that post and terminates there, and that's going to be for the reading lights above the bed, and also a couple of USB sockets to charge our phones. And then the other cable, or the other 2 cables I should say, again travels along there, up the post. One comes out the top up there I should say. That's for the that's gonna be for the light, that is, that's going to sit above the table. And then the final cable runs along there and terminates there, and that's going to have a 12-volt socket. As you've seen all this in the diagram earlier, that's going to have a 12-volt socket on it and a USB, and again that'll be on the table. So if we've got laptops or anything, we'll be able to charge them while we're working or whatever it may be. We have all that cable that's left down there. Got some 6mm and some odds and sods. Now the 6mm cable is going to be for the diesel heater and the fridge. So of course they're going to be down low, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to feed those cables yet. But I'm thinking if I get the floor down, and then I'll run them along the top of it. You've got your batteries down there, and I'm going to have to run a cable from there under the mat through this pillar here and down here to the fuse box at the back, and that's going to be for the battery to battery charger. And that's the first 6 wiring taken care of. Now there might be a few of you out there saying, like, why hasn't he just put one video out covering his whole electrical system in that, showing that I could show the cables being ran, show everything being connected up and showing it all working? Well, my answer to that is this build series that I'm trying to put together, I want to cover every single stage that I go through in turning it from a panel van into a camper van. And of course there's a set order of things that I need to follow in order to achieve that. So obviously this video is first 6 wiring, but the actual connecting the whole electrical system together won't be till later on down the line, when I've got all my appliances in and it's all ready to be hooked up. That's my logic, that's my thinking anyway. So for instance, in my next video I'll be covering the battening, and the one that follows that I'm going to be covering the insulation. Now I'm not saying this is the correct way to do things, but in my mind it makes sense. And not only that, I've seen other people sort of follow this route as well. So it's worked for them, hopefully it'll work for me too. Now this series of videos that I'm putting together, I'm hoping that it can help people similar to myself, those who've got no knowledge of building camper vans but want to do so. I'm hoping that the videos that I upload to YouTube can help take some of the legwork out of the research that they might need to do to build their own. And not only that, I'll get feedback from you guys down in the comments section below. You tell me where I might be going wrong with something, or you advise me where I could do something better, and I really appreciate that. And on that note, I think I waffled on long enough now, so I'm going to knock it on the head there. But what I would like to say is if you've enjoyed this video, then please give me a thumbs up. It really would help my little channel. And until next time guys, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, then please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more and you haven't done so already, then please consider subscribing. And don't forget to hit that notification bell down below so you know exactly when we put up a new video. And until next time guys, take it easy, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.